So let's talk about this world that Mark described, because I agree, it's coming. These devices are coming, these experiences are coming, but I'm a big believer we shouldn't just sit back and wait for them to come and see what companies like Facebook decide to serve us up, and really think about how do we want to live in a world where we have these devices. To your point, I mean, we're going to have the option to be that dude sitting on the couch with the blanket and the headset. I just don't think that's a world we want to live in. It's available, but I do think there are going to be all these interesting possibilities, and I want to share the thing that I shared backstage, because I get the opportunity to play around with all this stuff, and it is here. One of those series that I'm working on for Axios that's going to run in a few weeks is called Pieces of the Metaverse, and it's basically saying the full vision that Facebook talked about last year probably take 5 to 10 years before something's light enough that you can wear it all day and it's super, augmented reality and everything. But pieces of it are being developed right now. They exist in the labs. They're being sold as products. I have these Facebook glasses with Ray-Ban that do a tiny thing. They do one piece of it. They record video, and I use it. I play softball, and I use it. I pitch softball, and it's really fun to take these short video clips that capture the game from my perspective. But I also am really cautious. I think Mark was asking me, or Ken, do you post them on Instagram? And I'm like, no, because I actually haven't gotten consent from anyone. Nobody knows that the glasses that I'm wearing, when I go like this, I've started recording. And so there's all sorts of privacy implications. There's all sorts of safety and security. So let's dive in. I mean, first of all, maybe, Ken and Andy, I'll give you a chance. What do you think of the world that Mark's laid out? We all agree it's coming, right? Is anyone?
We do.
Andy, you think it's coming?
It reminds me of, in the energy domain, nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion has been 20 years away for the past 60 years.
Yeah.
The metaverse has been 5 years away for the past 25 years. Is that timeline getting compressed? Maybe as technology advances, but let's be clear. The farthest along thing that's actually out there that people are actually wearing is a tiny camera embedded in a pair of glasses. Big whoop.
Yeah, I think we'll see it in professional circumstances, industrial circumstances for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And partially it's a social phenomena. Like you said, you're not sure about how people will react in those moments.
And there's still, other than recording my softball thing, most of the time I don't see a lot of benefit in walking around with a pair of glasses that's going to creep out my friends. I creep them out enough, so.
But I don't even think of the metaverse as one particular landing spot. I think it's a journey from where we are with technology increasingly becoming part of our lives in a way that we want it to be part of our lives. So it's how does technology kind of augment what we do today so that we can live our best lives? I think that's the piece, and that talks about the need for experience. It talks about consumer making conscious choices of where they wanted to come in, and it doesn't necessitate a pair of glasses. That might be one destination, but there's lots of hopping off points along the road. How do you go to a restaurant tomorrow where you consent that your data, the things you like, you're lactose intolerant, you're trying to eat less red meat, you haven't worked out today, you've already consumed 2,000 calories. How do you consent that to the restaurant in advance so that you get a hyper-personalized menu for one? Doesn't require a pair of glasses, but it's bringing technology and allowing us to share it with participants in the ecosystem in a way that we get back value. It's not the metaverse, but it's a step towards it. It's technology coming into our lives to help us live our best life.
I think whenever that vision, so that moment there in space when you're in the restaurant, when you tell that story, everyone, I think, tends to think, oh my God, there's sort of this overarching overlord of information and state and preferences that's just bearing down on every little moment, and God, how do I get in and out of that? But I don't think it looks very different from general computing today, where those are essentially applications. You might belong to sort of a restaurateur app, and whatever hardware it is, the phone or your eyeglasses, engage in that moment. And it uses spatial awareness, recognizing your particular restaurant, looking at a particular menu, and brings that up. The Luddite in us might be like, I don't use that app, I don't use any other app, or I use one to get around in traffic, or I use one with my family when we play a game at home. But I think the seamfulness of today's computing environment we'll just continue forward with more capability.
And taking that concept forward, Mark, I mean, the scenefulness concept. So you're in that restaurant, you're having seafood. We have the technologies today to make the scenery around you, it's just an LED TV, transform to show you pictures of oceans, to put a spray of salt in the air above you, to heighten the experience. So the technology creates the experience in that environment. And that's technology coming into our world, but in a way where we're choosing.
Yeah.
And do you want any of this?
I'm sorry?
Do you want any of this?
I want relatively little of this, but I can imagine going to a restaurant and getting a personalized menu. Let's ignore that it's hard for restaurants to deliver personalized food to everybody. Ignore that for a second. Yeah. Let's say they can do that. Do I want a somewhat personalized menu based on what the cloud knows about my tastes and preferences in history? Yeah, I could see that. Here's the difficult part, though. And this might not be popular with everybody. I will give up my privacy willy-nilly for something as silly as a personalized menu in a restaurant, and I think, am the rule rather than the exception. My point with this is that we have these ongoing discussions about privacy among privacy advocates and regulators, and that is a very, very, very small tranche of the population. The history of the web so far shows that most people don't care about their privacy in the same way and are willing to give it up very, very easily. And I don't buy the they are ignorant sheep being manipulated by evil capitalist position. I think that's really, really naive and condescending to people. My fear, you used the word Luddites. My fear is that we're going to let the Luddites dictate our technology future. I'm even more frightened of that than I am of the engineers, much more frightened than of the engineers dictating our technology future.
Well, I think you can have that experience, but in Europe, you'll have to click accept all 6 times, and then you can have it.
Right, exactly. And then the regulators will declare that a great victory for privacy on the European continent.
I think
I'm not on board with that.
That example of having to click is exactly why privacy needs to be converted from a concept of threat to a virtuous concept, meaning invoking a certain modality in people's lives. You obviously need some central authorities, maybe governmental or maybe various trusted parties. Obviously Web3 technologies might help, but where in the public sphere and in the private sphere, you can essentially state, kind of like putting your mute switch on your phone. I don't want my phone to ring right here. I don't want to be seen right here. I don't want my data to go anywhere right here. But of course, there are many other moments where I walk in, I decide I'm in a moment of trust. Let's say I'm at a conference and I want people to be able to, quote, see me digitally. So I turn it on so that people can come up and go, oh, I know who you are and I know what you do, because they've seen my sort of data pattern ahead of the actual me. I can turn it off if I go to another place and I just want to be alone.
I actually want to challenge Andy for a second too on this, because I agree in the general and in the abstract. And a lot of situations are the, do I care about, cookies or whatever, this sort of very generic, like what I'm giving up, I will give up for very little. But I also notice the world we're heading to, especially in the United States right now, where suddenly it has a much bigger impact. Suddenly the risk of that data, I've spent a lot of time, sure everyone knows, America, thanks to a leak on the Supreme Court, we know we're about to lose access to, abortion for much of the country. And, I'm very concerned that the data that I may never have consented to giving in the first place is going to be used to track, everyone who's coming in and out of an abortion clinic, and they might not be getting that data from me. They might be getting it from Cruise, who's been testing autonomous vehicles right outside. So I do think it's important to have the conversation. I just think it needs to be more sophisticated than the one we're having.
Yeah, so to me, I think data really needs to start to be thought of as an asset class. And what I mean by that is, our definition of things that construe value has historically been dollars and euros and yen, right? Fiat currencies. It's broadened today to include new types of asset classes. So, you've got cryptocurrencies, you've got non-fungible tokens, you've got central bank issued digital currencies, you've got loyalty points sitting on a hotel, right? In the future, I think you need to broaden that again. And we need to start considering data to be an asset class. And when it's an asset class, we understand how we accrue it, how we use it, but more importantly, we're in control of it. So we choose when we will exchange it and for what value. So I could see a future where you walk into a bookstore and in exchange for a book, right, rather than you being a part of their loyalty program in advance, you could actually say, actually, I'm going to give you my browsing history. I'm going to tell you what I like reading, and I'm going to make a conscious decision to do that, to give you that at this moment on my phone. I'm going to do it in exchange for that book.
But
Because
that's where I
data
agree
become
with
an
Andy.
asset.
We will trade that for a hill of beans. We will trade that for 3 magic beans. Like, they won't have to give us any 2 magic beans.
Race to the bottom
Do I hear
here.
1? That sort of data exchange, I agree with Andy. It's sort of meaningless. Like, it's meaningless in the sense that the average person, at least in America, and I think Europe might demand 5 beans. Because privacy is way more important here.
Right.
But
Click here to accept all beans, right?
But I think the other piece is the data that's known about us, like the data that's being collected about us, that's non-consensual in this world.
You bring up this fundamental point, and I'm with you. I am dismayed about the rights that appear to be that are about to be taken away from Americans. It's a big deal, and it's terrifying to me. It is already perfectly legal for anybody to film you or me walking into an abortion clinic. You can film people in public without their consent. It's got nothing to do, in public, it's got nothing to do with autonomous vehicles or the metaverse or cookies or anything. Now, I don't want to revisit that right to film people in public. These issues bring up some pretty thorny questions, but the idea that we used to live in this golden age of privacy and now it's being taken away by the metas of the world, that doesn't play for a second.
Mark, I want to keep continuing to keep the downsides in the front of our mind, but I also want to look at, what is the best, in all the conversations you're having with clients, what are some of the really interesting, because what you're talking about is really no less and no more than the physical world and the digital world coming together. And we've talked a little bit about how that creates some challenges.
The best conversations
Yeah.
happen in industrial situations where the context is contained. So the privacy conversation isn't a problem. I do have hope. So I think I join you in the pessimism, but the long curve of it is that after these industrial situations stand up and things like healthcare start to see real value in it, then there will be enough realization that the intimacy of everyday moments is suddenly activated by you, as you are a walking digital entity, not just a physical entity, that it will all dawn on us how crazy important it is. We give all that shit up right now, willy-nilly, as you said, because we don't see the ramifications. But if you start seeing the ramifications...
I disagree with you. We do see the ramifications, and they are okay
abstract.
with us.
I think it's too abstract.
Okay.
And I think
So
when
let me
it's super
give you-
physical, we will care.
Let me give you, to be optimistic, let me give you one example of something in the metaverse that I had a conversation with one of the big online marketplaces about, and I think it could be pretty interesting, but maybe that's just me. So imagine in the future, you're setting out to go redesign your house, right? And you can take a living room, or your whole house, into a metaverse-style experience that's delivered at the front end of an online marketplace that have multiple vendors, multiple brands sitting behind it. You step into that world, you go, I want to redesign my living room. And from their catalog of all their products and services, from all the vendors that sit behind that online marketplace, in your living room, which you've brought into their digital world, you can paint your walls, you can pop furniture into it, okay? You can have their sales agents come in and go, actually, we have that table in a smaller size. And then when you've done this, you can bring your friends in, and your friends are going to go, my God, that's beautiful, but actually red on the wall is not your color. You need to think about blue.
Your friends are not going to say that. Your friends are, you have terrible taste, and don't ever do that.
I just want to be clear, though, that is, I've been listening to the AR discussions from tech companies for the last, to your point, 5-10 years. That is the best and sometimes only example they've been able to come up. The phones have this thing, AR kit, where you can virtual, this thing, basically measuring things and ordering furniture are the only examples. I don't actually think they'll be the only examples. I think there's
a bit
better.
of that going on.
But to your point, I think what I am super excited about, to your point, all that data could be near me and digitally accessible. And meal preferences is one thing. Food allergies is super interesting. Medical conditions is another thing. Like if I had that data and again could make it available, or I've set a preference that it's always available to EMTs to notice that I'm allergic to erythromycin, or I have a heart condition, or whatever. That does start to get interesting. And healthcare or workplace is an example where the stakes are super high and the privacy expectations are super low. I also am intrigued by the idea of physical and digital worlds colliding in entertainment experiences. I think there's opportunities there. I'm somewhat skeptical, but I'm somewhat optimistic that those are situations that can be built for. Concerts can be super exciting, I think.
I played the most amazing, so I worked with Magic Leap for many, many years, and we played the most amazing game. It had to be set up by hand, but basically, in one room that was full of sofas and various hardened furniture, the kind of stuff you could bump into, because you'll understand why, we were all given little wands. Now, they're just simple wands that are pointers. And we put on the Magic Leap headset, and each of us turn into a cartoon character from the shoulders up. We look ridiculous. We still see the room, so it's not like we've left, and we're able to just kind of walk around, and our hands are holding these sort of ridiculous squirt guns. They're squirting some fantasy bubbles and stuff. Well, in that room, we're all running around playing this game of, shooting each other. It was really a nice experience. Maybe something I think kids would really get into. But what was phenomenal about it, it was a shared virtual experience, not something in isolation, and it involved the real world. And afterwards, in fact, we were pouring fake tea from each other's cups. It was, as a technical, if you understand the technical achievement of having one person's solo experience transmit to another, just so incredible. So I do think there's incredible hope there.
Yeah, and I mean, just to broaden that out even a little bit more, I mean, we have to be conscious of things that are happening today as well. People are buying digital assets in digital worlds. And at some point in time, they're going to want to be able to...
And they're getting cheaper by the minute.
Not all of them.
I've got a stable coin to sell you. Bargain of the century.
Well, I think there's an interesting...
Buy a plot of land in the central land and you'll have the opposite view.
I think you're talking about what adults are wasting their money on, Ken, Andy, and I think, Ken, you're talking about what my kid wants to spend, which is also wasting money, but in a way that seems to please them and please the company even more, which is buying, 30,000 coins on Hot Wheels. My big objection as a parent is not actually, I get that my 9-year-old values digital goods in the same way that I value physical. I just wish those had a shelf life longer than the game. I wish they were persistent. I wish, and again, I wasn't any better as a kid of where I put my allowance than I think my kid will be, and I don't begrudge him spending on virtual goods, but I do wish we'd get to a world where they had a different kind of permanence.
So, and I think they have to. I think we have to get there because those kids will grow up and it'll be their money rather than yours, right?
I'm ready. I'm ready for that world.
Yeah, but
so I think we have to build exchange.
I'm a cynic on that because, Disney as a place has Disney bucks and there are various monies involved in parks in the real world, and they're not happy to move that money around either, and they've had, that doesn't need technology. I think these private spaces have a vested interest in keeping the value locked into that little universe.
And one of the promises of Web3 is that they're going to head us more into the world that Ina and Ken want to make happen. That's a huge open question. It's possible.
It's possible. Whether
is it probable?
Is another thing.
Man, that's a much harder question.
But this is the
it's
tension.
An ordinary business problem at that point is whether there's enough pressure from consumers to behave one way versus the pressure from the company.
I would argue that some of those worlds become more sustainable over time if the value that you put in those worlds can be brought in and out of those worlds as well. I think it's much more likely that those
Apple
worlds
might
will
argue
exist
with
between
you.
10 and 15 and 20 years rather than be fads and disappear.
Yeah. That could very well happen. There's the Microsoft argument, open systems create larger systems, and then Apple, of course, could have a fantastic counter-argument to that.
And I'm curious, what are the, and I think this gets to someone, are there problems that are going to be solved? Are there problems in our life today that are going to be solved, or are these just new experiences? And new experiences that do things that don't exist today and don't solve a problem aren't inherently bad. I mean, a movie, we go there to have a new experience that doesn't solve a problem that we want to have. So I have no objection to that, but I'm curious, are there problems today that you see being solved? There's a few that I'd put on that list. I think, and even in virtual reality, which in general, I look at technology this way. I think technology can take people that are physically proximate and make them further apart, which is a terrible experience. If the four of us were sitting here and wearing VR headsets, that would be a terrible use of the fact that we traveled.
I sat next to a couple strangers on a plane yesterday. I desperately wanted a physically distant experience. And I got one. So I'm disagreeing with your characterization. It's always terrible to be virtually distant from physically proximate people. Sometimes that's exactly what you want.
And I do think the plane is a place for that, and for that reason. I also think if you're older and not able to travel, the idea of somebody who's basically immobile being able to travel again is amazing. So I don't want to cast, but are there other types of experiences that solve problems we have today? And again, I think that's an example of one. You're housebound.
We could get into a laundry list, and happy to do that. But
well, we have a
timer.
Yeah,
I'll
I don't think we'll
generalize it. Generalized computing has given us abstract access to the world. Things like, from a screen in front of me, I can monitor a factory, and so I can keep it running. I can lower the cost of running that factory. From another monitor in a hospital, I can watch the health of a lot of patients who are plugged into sensors. Those have been great, but there are so many instances of value where computing can offer value in that moment, when I'm standing in front of the patient, when I'm on the factory floor walking, when I'm walking down the hotel hallway trying to figure out which rooms need to be cleaned, when I'm in my house and the plant over in the corner is shouting at me, I need water, right? Those are little moments where you animate the universe that you're standing in, as opposed to abstractly referring to it away from it. And I think there's thousands of possibilities, and of course we could talk about it all day.
And I have to say, I'm with Mark on that. People will watch a webcam of pandas running around. The advance of technology lets you sit there and have that immersive experience. I think there are a lot of cool things to be done. To your point, the web, we have all the world's information. It exists, but it exists like this, or it exists like this. I am excited by the opportunity to get involved in it, to dive into that experience, or to have that information there, augmenting the thing. Where it gets super tricky, though, is, the faces thing. I'm at a conference, maybe I do want to share a range of information. We're sharing it right now, to your point. It's in the DLD app, or it's in the TED app, or whatever. It would be nice if that same information showed up on my glasses so I could remember the person I saw. Are those generally good things? Have I sold you at all, or you're like, nah?
There's a part of this.
I'm the guy who wants these kinds of things. I'm the guy who says we give away privacy willy-nilly to get the magic beans. Yeah, give us more magic beans.
So, to me, there's clear arguments for heightened experiences, regardless of where on that spectrum.
Well, that's a panel later. The heightened experiences, I believe, that's at 7 p.m.
But no compute required.
One part of this is consumer, right? And it's about enhancing consumer experience. But I also think there's a merchant or a brand play in some of these worlds as well. And that's about connectivity and loyalty and affinity to a brand. I'll give you an example. There's a car company currently working on an experience where you can step into a virtual world and design your car. You can meet the sales assistant, you can design your car.
If you think we're bad at designing rooms, I think we're going to be any better at designing a car?
I'm with you. I think But this is most of
That's
the
what
stuff.
car designers' job is.
Most of the stuff, this is not building the wheels. This is actually
Provisioning a
designing
car.
your car, right? As in, I want leather and I want an M Sport version, or I want a whatever.
Customizing.
What kind of fake wood do you want on the dashboard of your, I don't know.
But honestly, as haptics and other technologies, like most people that are in this world at the moment are experimenting. They're experimenting for a world that they believe will exist in 3 and 4 years, and they're learning. And that's what they're doing. So they're playing with haptics so you can feel the leather. They're taking the car out in a test drive so you can actually drive it on the road. And does it generate a sale? No, probably not. You're still going to walk into a sales room, but it builds affinity for the brand. So I think there's a merchant brand story piece in this, separate to the consumer piece as well. You know?
Well, I'd love to keep having the discussion. The music has started. They're literally playing us off. Go to bed, kids. Yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation. Give it up for the panelists.
Thanks, guys.